There are moments in life when silence feels louder than any storm, when the stillness of a room is filled with the echoes of what could have been. Rose had everything that the world told her to desire: an elegant home filled with shining chandeliers, a career that earned her respect and recognition, and a life that, on the outside, looked enviable. People looked at her and saw a woman who had conquered the odds, a woman who was strong, composed, and untouchable. But when the world grew quiet and night settled around her, when the lights went off and the masks she wore for others slipped away, Rose faced the one truth she could not escape. She was lonely, achingly lonely, and nothing could fill the void that had lived inside her since the day she walked away from Jack. Jack. Even the sound of his name in her thoughts carried a warmth that no success could ever match. He had been the wild one, the dreamer, the man who lived with reckless passion and dared to believe that life was more than duty and expectation. Where others saw Rose as fragile porcelain, Jack had seen her as fire, untamed, fierce, and capable of burning through the chains that held her. He had loved her in a way no one else ever had, not for her beauty, not for her potential, but for her soul. And in return, she had loved him too, though she never said it aloud. Pride had locked the words inside her, fear had chained her decisions, and life had pulled her down a path that promised safety but stole her joy. Years had passed, but time had not dulled the sharpness of that wound. Rose could still remember the night she left him, the look in his eyes when she walked away, torn between begging her to stay and letting her go with dignity. She had convinced herself it was the right choice, that choosing stability over passion was wisdom. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, and every time she heard laughter in the distance, she remembered the sound of his voice. The pain of unfinished love does not fade, it lingers like a ghost that never rests. Her days were filled with meetings, events, and polite smiles, but her nights belonged to regret. She would lie awake staring at the ceiling, whispering words into the darkness that she had never spoken aloud. "I love you, Jack." The confession always came too late, swallowed by silence, carried away by the emptiness of her room. She imagined what it would have been like if she had stayed, if she had chosen him instead of the safer path. Would they be living in a small house with more laughter than wealth? Would they have grown together, stronger, braver, freer? The tragedy of her life was not that she had failed, it was that she had succeeded in everything except the one thing that mattered most. She had abandoned the only man who had ever truly seen her, and that decision had carved a hollow space in her heart that nothing could ever fill. Now, as she looked out of her window at the city lights glittering like empty promises, she realized with painful clarity that no amount of riches, applause, or recognition could ever replace the warmth of Jack's hand in hers. She had loved him then. She loved him still. But the question that haunted her was whether it was already too late. Friends, if this story touches your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more heartfelt tales. The decision to return to her hometown had not been an easy one. Rose had avoided it for years, convincing herself that the place belonged to another life, a version of her that no longer existed. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She had been running from memories that waited for her at every corner, memories that wore Jack's face and carried Jack's laughter. When she finally stepped off the train and felt the familiar wind brush against her skin, it was as if time folded back on itself. The streets looked smaller, the shops older, but the air smelled the same, carrying with it the bittersweet comfort of a place she had once called home. She walked slowly, her heels clicking against the cracked pavement, her eyes darting to landmarks that pulled her deeper into the past. The bakery where Jack used to steal pastries just to make her laugh, the bookstore where they spent hours reading poetry out loud, the riverbank where they had once skipped stones until the sun disappeared behind the hills, every detail cut into her like a blade wrapped in velvet. She had spent years pretending that these places were gone, erased by the weight of time, but now, standing in front of them, she realized they had never disappeared. They had only waited for her. The heaviest moment came when she reached the small park, the one with the weathered wooden bench where she and Jack had spent countless nights talking about dreams bigger than the stars above them. She stopped in her tracks, her chest tightening as if invisible hands were squeezing her heart. The bench was still there, faded and chipped, but the memories it held were alive and vibrant. She could almost see them, two young souls huddled together against the cold, whispering promises of forever. The ghost of laughter echoed in her ears, and suddenly, the weight of everything she had lost came crashing down. Rose sat on the bench, her body trembling as the floodgates broke. Tears streamed down her face, unrelenting, raw, and desperate. For years she had worn armor, pretending she was strong, pretending she had no regrets. But here, in the park where her love story had been written and abandoned, she could no longer lie to herself. She bent forward, her hands covering her face, and for the first time in a decade, she allowed herself to grieve for the life she had thrown away. Her voice cracked as she whispered into the empty air, her words carried away by the breeze. "I miss you, Jack." It was not just a confession. It was a surrender, an admission that despite the years, the distance, and the choices that had separated them, her heart had never truly left him. And as she sat there crying beneath the fading light of dusk, Rose felt something stir deep inside her, a fragile, painful hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The rain had begun as a gentle drizzle, but soon it turned into a steady downpour that soaked the streets in silver. Rose pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the familiar roads, her mind heavy with memories. She had not planned on staying long, just a short visit to satisfy the ache in her heart, but fate has a way of weaving its own patterns, guiding footsteps where they are meant to be. She stopped at a street corner, waiting for the signal to change, when her eyes fell upon a figure across the road. At first, he was just another silhouette blurred by the rain and headlights, but something about his posture, the way he leaned down with his sleeves rolled up, caught her attention. A car had broken down, its hazard lights blinking in the storm, and there he was, helping a stranger without hesitation, his hands working with quiet determination. Rose's breath caught in her throat. Even before she saw his face, her heart recognized him. Jack. Her body froze as though the world had stopped spinning. She could barely believe it. After all these years, after countless nights imagining his face in her dreams, here he was in the flesh. He looked older, yes, with faint lines etched across his forehead and streaks of silver in his dark hair, but his spirit shone exactly as she remembered. That unshakable kindness, that selfless warmth, it was him. Rose felt her knees weaken, the umbrella slipping from her grip as the rain poured down on her uncovered head. Her heart pounded violently, every beat a painful reminder of the years she had lost. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him, but fear held her in place. Would he even recognize her? Would he even want to? Jack straightened after tightening the final bolt, his broad shoulders glistening with rain. As the driver thanked him and drove away, Jack stood alone in the middle of the storm, wiping his wet hands on his jeans. It was then that his gaze lifted, and landed on her. Time collapsed. The rain was loud, yet the silence between them was louder. Rose felt exposed under his eyes, every regret, every unsaid word crashing to the surface. Jack's expression shifted as recognition dawned. For a moment, his face hardened, guarded, as if he wasn't sure whether to believe she was really standing there. Rose trembled, her lips parting but no words coming out. 10 years of separation hung between them like a wall, but their eyes refused to look away. The rain drenched them both, water dripping down her face and his, yet neither moved. It was as though the storm itself had orchestrated this meeting, demanding that they face what had been left undone. Rose's tears blended with the raindrops, and though she said nothing, her trembling gaze carried the words she had held back for years, "I still love you." Jack's eyes softened, the bitterness faltering for just a second, and in that suspended moment, they both knew, something far greater than time was at play. Fate had brought them back together, and the story they thought was over had just reopened its first page. After that rainy night, their lives could no longer pretend to move on untouched. Rose and Jack found themselves crossing paths again, sometimes by choice, sometimes by coincidence, though neither truly believed it was coincidence anymore. The first conversations were strained, burdened with the weight of 10 years of silence. They spoke cautiously, as if afraid that one wrong word might shatter the fragile thread reconnecting them. Rose would catch herself staring at Jack, memorizing the way his smile had grown rarer, the way his eyes seemed to carry both warmth and hurt in equal measure. He was still the same man she had loved, but life had carved him into someone more guarded, more careful with his heart. Jack, on the other hand, didn't know what to make of her return. Part of him wanted to push her away, to remind her of the night she left and the years of emptiness that followed. Yet another part of him, the part that still remembered her laughter, the fire in her spirit, the way she had once made the world brighter, couldn't deny the stirring inside him when she was near. He told himself he was only being polite, only entertaining brief conversations. But each time he walked away from her, he found himself wishing their talks had lasted longer. Slowly, the walls began to crack. One evening, they found themselves walking by the riverbank where they once skipped stones as kids. Jack picked up a flat pebble, threw it across the water, and for the first time in years, Rose laughed, a sound so familiar and fragile it nearly broke him. That small moment opened a door neither had realized was still waiting. From then on, they began to share little pieces of themselves again, memories, confessions, and even the silence that no longer felt awkward but comforting. Rose knew she had to prove herself. She wanted Jack to see she wasn't the same girl who once chose fear over love. Every time she looked into his eyes, she silently promised she wouldn't walk away again. Jack, too, wrestled with his bitterness, slowly learning that forgiveness was not about forgetting the past but about choosing to believe in a new future. And in the spaces between their conversations, between the laughter and the tears, something beautiful began to grow once more, not the reckless love of their youth, but a deeper, stronger bond built on the courage to begin again. The evening sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. Rose and Jack sat together on the old park bench, the same one where their love had once been born, the same one where she had cried alone just days earlier. Now, they sat in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Jack leaned back, his arms crossed, his eyes distant as though he was fighting a storm within. Rose sat forward, her hands trembling, her heart pounding as if urging her to finally speak the truth she had carried for so long. For days, they had danced around the past, sharing laughter, sharing fragments of themselves, but never fully touching the wound that still bled between them. Tonight, however, Rose knew the time had come. She could no longer hide behind hesitation or pride. She turned to him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, and whispered, her voice barely steady, "Jack." He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on her chest. Her throat tightened, but the words forced their way out. "Finally, I have to say it. I love you, Jack. I always did. I was too scared to admit it then, and I was too proud to come back sooner. But I can't run anymore. I don't care if it makes me look foolish, I don't care if people call me crazy, I know what I want now. I want you, only you." The tears she had held back spilled freely, streaking her face as her hands gripped the edge of the bench. For a long moment, Jack didn't move. His jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling heavily, his silence nearly unbearable. Rose felt the sting of fear course through her, fear that perhaps it was too late, that her confession had come at the wrong time, that fate had given her this chance only to snatch it away again. And then, slowly, Jack reached for her hand. His touch was warm, steady, trembling with emotion he had tried for so long to bury. His voice broke when he finally spoke. "Do you know how many nights I wished you'd come back? Do you know how many times I told myself to stop loving you, and failed every single time? You left me with nothing, Rose, but even then, I never stopped waiting." His eyes glistened as he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though he was afraid the world might steal her away again. In that embrace, years of pain dissolved. The bitterness, the regret, the what-ifs, all of it melted under the force of their truth. They were no longer two people haunted by the past. They were two souls, finally brave enough to choose each other in the present. The park around them blurred, the sunset faded, and in that moment, all that existed was the heartbeat of two people who had finally come home. Because sometimes, love doesn't die, it simply waits. And when it finds its way back, it is stronger, deeper, and more unbreakable than before. If this story moved you, please share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories of love, redemption, and hope.